Hello everybody, back again. Today we are in Perkasie, Pennsylvania at the site of the former Perkasie train station, which is along the former Reading Bethlehem branch. The route was originally built by the North Penn Railroad in 1855. The Philadelphia and Reading leased it in 1879, and I would only assume that not too long, probably after the turn of the century, the Reading acquired full control over it. I don't know the full history of this line. Again, like when I was in Quakertown, I was talking about this. This is the same branch. Used to come from Philadelphia down through Lansdale and all the way down into Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So, like I said, it was originally the North Penn Railroad. Started operation in 1855, 1879. Philadelphia and Reading leased it, and I'm sure sometime soon after, the Philadelphia and Reading acquired full control over it. There's a little, pretty neat. The more you look around here, the more things you find. I'm not sure what's going on in there anymore, but apparently nothing. Imagine all the passengers that waited in this over the years. This here looks original to me. I would say probably, I don't know, 1800s, most likely. It's got a lot of the little signature marks of it. So we're here, talk about a couple things. Station, and we're going to go down here to the freight station. This line, like I said, was originally the North Penn, then it was the Reading. And in 1976, after Conrail days, when the Reading and a bunch of other East Coast railroads converged and went out of business and became Conrail, this was taken over by SEPTA and Conrail. They ran SEPTA and Conrail trains, both ran on this. I'm not sure who technically owned it then, but this line here is still currently owned by SEPTA. SEPTA stopped running passenger service here in 1981, mostly because of costs, and I would assume because they have to keep it. This is a non-electrified line, so I would assume it's probably because SEPTA didn't want to have to have special diesel engines just to come down here. But like I said, in 1976, this became controlled by, I guess the freight was, obviously Conrail was the freight, and the passenger service was done by SEPTA. And then up until 1981, they still ran through here. SEPTA did, that is. And SEPTA still owns the line. Of course, they don't own all the structures around it, but they do own the line. You can see the little, all the passenger station stuff here. It's pretty cool too. There's still a lot here. Like I said, if you look, hey, look at that. How cool is that old line? There's probably a bunch of these down here at one time, lining along here. That is cool. I never noticed that. Of course, you got an old signal here. This might have been for something for the siding. I love old signals. It's so cool. It's cool when either modern day railroads don't have the interest, the money, or the desire to tear down old infrastructure, because the old infrastructure is cool. Anyone who's into trains will agree. Even this here, this is the 35-mile marker. I don't know my mile marker science all that well, but I would almost be willing to assume that that's from the Reading days. I'm not sure if Conrail would have put that kind up, or SEPTA. Again, there's another old lamp. Here's a taller signal. These are so cool. A lot of these have been definitely phased out of existence, and these are definitely not used by SEPTA. Or actually, Pennsylvania Northeastern runs this line. Like I said before in other videos, Pennsylvania Northeastern. I mean East Penn. Boy, I gotta get my brain straight today. Jeez. This is East Penn. East Penn picks up stuff in Quakertown, and it runs down to Telford, where they interchange with Pennsylvania Northeastern down in Telford. Then Pennsylvania Northeastern, after SEPTA's done running, it takes the freight, I think, down into the city, and then it points elsewhere after the city. So what's cool about this, like I said, that signal could have been a signal for the siding, and I'm not sure where the siding used to come down through here. I'm not sure where, but you can look. There's still some rail on the ground here, so it must have had a, maybe the switch came down up there where the land was kind of flat, but of course the rail is still here. And here is the freight station. I thought for sure this freight station was going to go away, but it was saved. Apparently it was going to be used for a restaurant, Mexican restaurant, I think I heard, but that didn't happen. It's not in the greatest shape, but it could be in worse shape. Here you can see where the siding used to come into the freight station. Like I said, it does look like there's a switch, maybe two switches, as you would oftentimes have at stations and freight stations. You would have track on each side of the station. This one here, there's definitely track there, and we definitely got track over here. Starting to say about the freight station, my research tells me the freight station was also built in 1891. I don't know if I mentioned about the Perkasie station up there being built in 1891, but according to my research, that's an 1891 station. And it also said that this station was 1891. I don't know. I mean, being that it was a freight station, they did things a little different, but I would be willing to assume this looks more like an 1880s station to me, because of the structure of it being wood construction. But like I said, I haven't found any actual information on it. Again, you can see the sidings here, and here is the freshly painted Perkasie Borough boxcar. Welcome to Perkasie. There used to be two boxcars sitting here. The other one was cut up. I forget when it was. A couple years ago now, they cut the other one up. But this one here, luckily, was saved. Did a nice mural on it. Like I said, there was two boxcars sitting here at one time. I think it was behind this one, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it was behind this one. And of course it was cut up. I'm not sure why. You see this siding went all the way back. I think that was an industrial complex or building back there. Both sides. You see the freight doors of the freight station. Again, I really doubt this is from, it could be from 1891. But just once you got closer to the turn of the century, most of the stations that were being built out of brick by that point. So here's the boxcar, 1879. I guess that's when Perkasie was incorporated. This is a former Pennsylvania Railroad. Let me see here. I know what it is, but I wrote it down just to make sure I didn't get it wrong. This is a former Pennsylvania Railroad built X58 boxcar. Apparently you can tell by the ends. I know this is just enough to be dangerous when it comes to freight cars. These were built in the early 60s by the Pennsylvania Railroad. These went into Penn Central, as did most of Pennsylvania Railroad stuff. And then in the Conrail. And according to the old interwebs, some of these even made it into a Norfolk Southern paint. But this is an early 1960s X58 boxcar. I had to write it down because I keep thinking about the ones the Pennsy boxcars that were converted into snow flangers. And I did a lot of research on those boxcars and the snow flangers they were turned into. So I keep wanting to mention the number of that boxcar, so that's why I wrote this down, just so I wouldn't get it confused. But X58. There's some talk around the internet. People don't like this. They say it's gaudy or they think it's weird. I think it's cool. It's being preserved. Shows the town. I like it. I think it's cool. And it's better than the other one that got cut up. So now oftentimes, not always, but often, you can tell the history of freight cars by the trucks. Oftentimes, but not always, the railroads will have their name or their reporting mark stamped into the trucks. I don't see it on here. These could have been replaced at one time. Oftentimes, a lot of times, if they don't have the original trucks, that's because they were friction bearing, or should I say plain bearing trucks, and then they were later replaced with roller bearings to comply with modern standards. Since this was built in the early 60s, I would assume this probably came original with roller bearing trucks. These are probably the originals. Don't quote me on that, but these are probably the original trucks. So, I don't know what they're going to do with this freight station, but anyone who knows me knows I'm a sucker for old wooden stations, especially Reading stations. Former Reading stations are just the coolest. This is a pretty cool branch. The Bethlehem branch, like I said. Wish I could figure out exactly when the Reading fully took over and incorporated it. Looks like there was some other platform used to come out here. See, this must have been quite a switching setup, where that switch went down for these two sidings. I'm not sure. But there's definitely a lot of neat stuff. If you look long enough, or you know where to look, eventually you'll find some cool stuff. Which is definitely the case around here. Little side of it. I'm wondering if there was actually a siding, another one that came in closer, because that'd be kind of odd, the other siding for the freight station being on that side. But there is a freight door on that side. So that may have been another line in closer here. It's hard to tell. Like I said, when I was in Quakertown doing the stuff down in Quakertown, I'm not an expert on the Bethlehem branch. I travel over it and around it enough, but I've never really actually looked into it or researched it too much. I just know enough about it to know something. And up here, like I said, this is modern day. East Penn operates this line. Perkasie is a neat little town, I tell you. Back in my younger days, I used to come up here to see bands play at the Old Town Tavern back in the day. And I wasn't drunk, but I sure as hell had a hard time getting out of this town every night. I couldn't. It's like there's one road in and one road out, and I kept going in circles. I could never get the hell out of this town. It's kind of funny. So, I'm gonna walk back here again. Little passenger platform. That platform is really neat. You don't see a lot of them saved anymore. I guess the reason that one survived so long is because SEPTA, kept it going up into the 80s. So like I said, SEPTA ran this up into 1981. They ran passenger service through here. Now there's a lot of talk, every now and again it comes up again, about reinstating passenger service back from, from the city or Lansdale. I guess probably mostly Philadelphia is where it would go. Because this line, if you follow this line always went right into Philadelphia. And from Philadelphia to Bethlehem, sounds like a good idea to bring back passenger service. Well, there's always some issues with it, and I can't swear to it, but I'll be willing to bet that you'll never see passenger service back through here. One is, unless SEPTA plans on getting more diesels, they'd have to electrify this line, which I couldn't imagine how much it would cost to electrify this line from Lansdale to Bethlehem. Would be unbelievable. Unbelievable. Also, from just about outside of Quakertown near Coopersburg on, the line's gone. The track's been pulled out. And a lot of that's been converted to a trail. And if anybody knows anything about trail people, they love their trails. And they have no problem seeing rail get destroyed for it. But man, you even joke about putting the rail back on top of their precious trail. Plus, the NIMBYs, means not in my backyard. The people who fought the trail going in, I'm sure, would without a doubt fight the railroad going back in. So there's a lot of things that really are going to hinder this line going back through here. But let's notice the sidewalk goes all the way down that side. This is neat. This must have been really something to see back in its day. So yeah, so if you keep hearing talk about putting the passenger service back in, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. Like I said, between the electrifying the line and covering back over top of the trail and putting the infrastructure back in, and even the demand. I mean, how many people need to go from Philly to Bethlehem? How many people commute each day to them? I don't know. Here's something else I just noticed on here, which is really cool. Which, another thing besides wooden structures I love station signs. I love old station signs. Looks like right there is where station signs used to hang. Right there. Still up there yet. And I think there's some on the other side too. And it used to say Perkasie. This would be a neat little area. This town cares a lot. This is a nice little town, actually. And they care a lot about keeping it nice, and they care about their history. You think they'd try to, like, maybe do something in here on these sidewalks, fix this up. There's two more hooks. Used to hold the station sign. So, well, hope we got enough little info in here just to recap. Like I said, this line here was originally North Penn, 1855. Reading leased it / more than likely took it over in 1879. Then in 1976, it went to control of Conrail and SEPTA. I think SEPTA actually acquired the line back then. I'm not sure, but I know that SEPTA owns it still to this day. And then I'm sure there was a host of other short lines who owned it between after those days, after Conrail stopped running freight until East Penn took over. I'm not sure. Not totally sure. But I like the fact the sidewalk's still in here. It's kind of neat. You can walk in and just take a look. And then, of course, the freight station down there. I'd like to know, I don't want to wander around too. I don't like wandering where you're not supposed to be. That's why I'm on, like, on the sidewalk here. This is open access. You can be on here. But I'd love to know where the switch used to be. That had to have been down there a good ways on flat ground to come down into here. Huh. All right, well, once again, I'd like to thank everybody for checking out my video and listening to me ramble on. And I'm doing my best to keep this channel going. Not exactly burning down the world with views, I'll tell you that, but it's kind of fun, and I like doing it, and I talk to people here and there that notice it. All right, thanks again. I'll see you next time.